Hi everyone, I'm J&A Sanday. I will be discussing the grading performance test. But before we start, let me ask you some question. Is it possible to explain why the students' output is as they are through an assessment of the process which they did in order to arrive at the final product? Yes, it is. Because it is important to assess students' learning not only through their outputs or products, but also to the process which the students underwent in order to arrive at these products or outputs. Performance task-based assessment. Performance assessments or tasks is a measure of assessment based on authentic tasks such as activities, exercise, or problems that require students to show what they can do. Some performance tasks are designed to help students demonstrate their understanding by applying their knowledge to a particular situation. Also, performance tasks, a piece of a work students are asked to do show how well they apply their knowledge to skills or abilities, from writing an essay to diagnosing and fixing a broken circuit. A performance assessment and typically consists of several performance tasks. Process-oriented learning competencies. Information about outcomes is important. To improve outcomes, we need to know about the student's experience along the way, about the curricula, teaching, and kind of students that lead to a particular outcomes. Learning competencies. The learning objectives in process-oriented, performance-based assessment are stated in direct observable behaviors of the student. Competencies are defined as a group or cluster of skills and abilities needed in a particular task. Example: task: recite a poem by Edgar Allan Poe. The Raven. Objectives. The activities aim to enable the student to recite a poem entitled The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Specifically, first, recite the poem from memory without referring to notes. Second, use appropriate hand and body gestures in delivering the piece. Third, maintain eye contact with the audience while reciting the poem. Fourth, create an ambience of the poem through appropriate rising and falling intonation. Fifth, pronounce the word clearly and with proper diction. The specific objectives identified constitute the learning competencies for this particular task. Example of simple competencies: first, speak with well-modulated voice. Second, draw straight line from one point to another point. Third, color leaf with green crayon. Examples of complex competencies: recite the poem with feeling, using appropriate voice quality, facial expression, and hand gesture. Second, construct equilateral triangle given three non-collinear points. Third, draw a color leaf with green crayon. Task designing. Standard for tasks for designing a task. First, identifying an activity that would highlight the competencies to be evaluated. Second, identifying an activity that would entail more or less the same sets of competencies. Third, finding a task that would be interesting and enjoyable for the students. Example: topic, understanding biological diversity. Possible task design: bring the students to the pond or creek. Ask them to find all living organisms near the pond or creek. Bring them to school playground to find as many living or organism they can find. Observe how the student will develop a system for finding such as organism and concluding the differences in biological diversity of two sites. Scoring rubrics. What is rubrics? A rubric, a scoring scale, used to assess students' performance. A coherent set of criteria for students' work that include description of levels of performance, quality on the criteria. Typically, rubrics are used in scoring or grading written assignments or oral presentation. However, they may be used to score any form of student performance. Elements of rubric: criteria, level of performance, descriptors. Criteria, one or more traits or dimensions that serve as the basis for judging the student's response. Definition and example to clarify the meaning of each trait to dimension. Level of performance, a scale of values on which to rate each dimension. Descriptors, spell out what is expected to students at each level of performance for each criterion. Types of rubrics: holistic and analytic rubric. The holistic rubrics provides comprehensive descriptions of each level of performance, useful for quick and general assessment and feedback. Description may be organized in columns or rows. Examples of holistic rubric for speaking. This is the examples of holistic for public speaking. This is for assessing a research paper. Advantage of holistic rubrics: scoring is faster than with analytic rubrics. Requires less time to achieve inter-rater reliability. Good for summative assessments. Disadvantage of holistic rubrics: single overall score does not communicate information about what to do to improve. Not good for formative assessment. Analytic rubric breaks out criteria for disguising between levels of performance on each criterion. Useful for detailed assessment and feedback. Descriptions are organized in a matrix. This is some examples for speaking test for analytic rubric. Divorce bill assessment is some examples of analytic rubric. Advantage of analytic rubric: gives diagnostic information to teacher, gives formative feedback to student, easier to link to instruct than holistic rubric. Good for formative assessment, adaptable for summative assessment if you need an overall score for combined scores. Disadvantage of analytic rubrics: takes more time to score than holistic rubrics. Takes more time to achieve inter-rater reliability than with holistic rubrics. Guidelines in developing rubrics: identify the quality and attributes that teacher wishes to observe in students' output that would demonstrate their level proficiency. Decide what type of rubric to use, whether analytical or holistic. Third, identify and define the standard of excellence for lowest level 2 of performance. Fourth, test whether the scoring rubric is reliable by asking 2 or more teachers to score the same set of projects or outputs and correlate their individual assessments. Tips and developing rubrics. First, talk with colleagues. Second, gather sample rubrics. Third, keep it short and simple. Ideally, the entire rubric should fit on one sheet of paper. Fourth, each rubric item should focus on different skill. Fifth, focus on how students develop and impress their learning. Sixth, begin with describing the highest or lowest level. After you write the descriptors of highest level, note that the words in that box that will vary from one student performance to another. These words will be the one that will changes as you write the next level. 7. As much as possible, avoid odd numbers in a rating scale. Studies show the evaluators tend to choose the neutral middle grade and more often in odd number scales. Advantage of rubrics in instructor. First, objective and consistent among all students. Second, lead to insight concerning the effectiveness of instruction. Third, clarifies criteria in a specific term. Fourth, data analysis becomes easier. Fifth, shows areas in need improvement. Sixth, establishes ground rules to resolve potential academic disputes. Advantage of rubrics in the students. Helps and define quality. Instructors' expectations are clear. Manner in which to meet the expectation are clear. Students can be better judged and revise their own work and assist their peer. Vehicle for student feedback promote the students or faculty. Thank you for listening. I am Jayan A. Sanday.